Thank you.
Yeah,
I was taking a nap before all this. I am so awake now. Thank you.
Well, I saw the picture twice now.
Twice.
Yeah. I like watching it.
Well, we're going to be here for a long time.
No, I looked at it again Saturday and really, really enjoyed the film so much. Yeah, really. And I guess I should just ask you, of course, to give us a little bit of a background as to what drew you to the story. To give us a sense of how it came about.
Well, I knew nothing about the story at all 2 years ago. I knew about Gary Powers because I was 13 when he was shot down, and that was the biggest news story, and everybody was talking about it, that he was he was a prisoner behind the Iron Curtain. But I didn't know about this story at all. And a young British playwright, Matt Charman, had been researching the Gleanaker Bridge, the spy swap on Gleanaker Bridge, and he found an entire paper trail, starting with James B. Donovan's work with John Ford and George Stevens, because the three of them compiled a documentary on the death camps in Germany and Poland, and put an hour-long documentary together, showed it at the Nuremberg war crime trials.
Right.
And James Donovan has a huge screen credit, which basically says, legal supervision by James B. Donovan.
Yeah, is that the one that was shown on TCM a few weeks ago?
That wasn't shown. The Nazi plan was shown, and he was involved in that. But this is a second documentary that TCM can't show. It's the most graphic Holocaust footage known. So he was very intrigued with this, and he followed the paper trail from Nuremberg to Donovan's work as representing insurance companies with this law firm. And put together the story, and then told me the story. And the first thing I did was, I doubted the credibility of the story. It sounded like everybody should have known a story like this. But when we all dug deeper into it, it turned out to be absolutely true.
Wow. I mean, in one of the things, of course, younger people may not realize that the Gary Powers was such a major part of American news at the time. And it was kind of shocking. It was 57, right? So we were coming. I was, what the heck? I was born 42. I can't do the math. I was born in 42. Somebody tell me what the hell age I was. I don't know. Anyway, it was like 16 or whatever it was. And, but how many? 15, thank you. And it's getting older,
I was 11.
Okay. But the thing about it, Steve, is that we came off the Cold War, and the Cold War was so vivid when you do the duck and cover, the turtle thing. I mean, I was in
Bert the turtle.
Bert the turtle, yeah. That was what we had. I was in New York, down on the Lower East Side, St. Patrick's Old Cathedral, the St. Patrick's Grammar School, which only recently closed a couple of years ago. But we would be suddenly told by the nuns, by the Mother Superior. It would be over the loudspeaker system, and you didn't know if it was going to happen or not. Right. Each day, suddenly she would come on and say, "Take attention, please. Take cover." And you had to get under the desk, and we had dog tags, too. And so for us, the Cold War, when Powers was on TV, he was perceived as like a Korean War brainwashed POW.
But he did that for a reason. We had Gary Powers' son, Gary Powers Jr., advising us on this, and I'm in a position because Gary Powers was reviled, simply because he didn't kill himself. Yeah. Number two, because he went on TV, and he gave and I've seen the recording several times, and I actually I recreated Austin Stoll, who plays Gary Powers, in front of the cameras. It wasn't a confession. It was almost an apology.
I know.
He said, "I have no enmity toward the Russian people."
Yeah.
But what he was doing was he had a dull affect, which wasn't Gary Powers, and he was hoping that people would see that he was faking it by creating a dull affect. And, of course, he was reviled the same way James Donovan and his entire family was reviled. Right. And thank goodness, this didn't happen during the age of social media, because imagine what they would have gone through had this happened today.
Yeah. No, I mean, what's interesting to me, is fascinating, is that Abel and Donovan, they both are men who stand up for what they believe in, right? And there's obviously the respect between the two of them. I just feel that it reminds me, in the great tradition thereof, of what we thought of in the older films before before this happened in '57, sort of a respect between the enemies, like as in von Stroheim and Pierre Freinet in Grand Illusion,
or Kurt Jurgens and Robert Mitchum in The Enemy Below.
The Enemy Below, or the the 1916 World War I truce, or even in War Horse when they let the horse go. I mean, did that come into play a great deal for you in terms of the story?
Well, it was just that in the Facts of Life, Donovan developed a fondness for Abel. Abel was a man of the arts. He was a painter. He played classical guitar. He spoke several languages, and he was absolutely apolitical, meaning he didn't. He wasn't spouting, communist rhetoric. He wasn't. He certainly wasn't admitting what he had done, but he also there was no undercurrent of animus at all.
Interesting.
And he had been embedded in this country by the Soviet Union, who, by the way, never acknowledged he was a spy. The Soviet Union never did. Even today, they don't. But he was embedded 15 years in America, and he really thought that when there were people that needed to identify him, that they would not be able to find anybody who would recognize him 50 years later. He was really worried about that on the bridge.
Yeah.
But Donovan and Abel had a relationship, and I so enjoyed working with Tom and Mark Rylance and Tom Hanks in all those scenes together that I had to put on the brakes because I wanted Matt Sharman and Joel and Ethan Cohen, who wrote all the subsequent drafts and took it very, very deep. I wanted more scenes between them, but then I realized if I had more scenes between them, when they finally get to the bridge after a great absence in 2 shots,
right,
it wouldn't have the impact that it has when you haven't seen the characters on screen for
together.
a long time.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about working with the Coens, Joel and Ethan, who I might remind everyone is from NYU. But you brought them in, and for me, it's like when the first scene with Tom and the other guy, and he's talking about that's not my guy.
That's Joel and Ethan.
It's very much that, and it really is wonderful how that carries through.
That's when Tom committed to the movie. He said he wanted to call me after page 6, but he didn't, because the movie originally opened with that scene, and then I actually took that scene, which was the first thing I shot with Tom, and I moved it because I had an afterthought that we should start the film with. I wanted to start the movie with a reflection because I think spycraft is about what's true and what's false. Is the reflection of the mirror of Rudolph Abel, is that the truth of Abel, or is Abel's painting, his understanding of what he looks like as a portrait artist doing a self-portrait, is that the truth? And so I just came up with this mirror shot to open the picture, and when I shot that, I thought we should actually open the picture with that and following and the apprehension of Abel, and then go to the Donovan character in that first scene. And that was the first scene. After page 5, Tom Hanks read the scene and just he said, I know who this guy is. I know how to play him.
Yeah. No, but you see, that's what's interesting, fascinating for me, watch your work over the years, is it's the difference between visual and literature. You went for the visual for the opening. The idea of the image, the reflection, you see, rather than a dialogue scene.
Oh yeah, if you
as
compare
good as the dialogue scene is.
Look, you compare me with literate and cinema. I am illiterate.
No. I know what I mean is yes, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. But there's a tendency to say if the lines are great and the actors are great, well, that's the movie. Well, it's a certain kind of movie. It's not every movie. But if you can think visually, if you can interpret the theme of the picture visually, and even if it isn't directly obvious, that's one of the reasons I watched the picture a couple of times, because these images stay with you. Before these guys get out of the car and all that stuff, this guy's painting and doing, what is that?
Well, the image that comes to mind that I'll never forget is out of Raging Bull with the rope and the blood, just that macro close up of the just blood dripping from the rope.
Yeah.
He didn't have. That said everything. Sometimes, I came up with a shot on the day because I saw all these not paparazzi, but they were in those days paparazzi before the name was known here, and they were taking all the pictures of Abel and Donovan and his wife and Alan Alda playing Waters, and I watched them popping their flash bulbs out to reload their flash bulbs, and they were hitting the ground. And I remember as a kid, seeing flash bulbs all over the ground. So I threw the camera on the ground.
It's great.
And just got one shot of their feet walking over the flash bulbs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the great thing about directing, that you can have tremendous respect for the written word, and I do, and I've recently been. I've had tremendous collaborations with Matt Sharman and the Coen brothers and certainly Tony Kushner and Tom Stopper.
Yes,
the written word
course.
is everything. We can't do anything without
it,
something on paper. But where you insinuate the camera and where you can sneak the cinema in on a word-heavy film is a real challenge.
That's extraordinary. That is true. Like it's a dialogue scene sometimes that is really, as you say, word-heavy. It's the old story. It's only one position for the camera. Well, where the hell is it? But it is a matter, though, of natural visual thinking, and that's I think what makes this picture so viewable, so watchable.
If I didn't have strong performances, I would have shot everything in singles, because then I can make the performances better in the cutting room. But when you've got great actors, I don't need the close-ups. Because everybody here can be the film editor. You can just sit here and watch the movie and decide who to look at. So when I had Mark Rylance in that first scene with Tom Hanks, putting the camera, where to put the camera was easy. Just put it where you can watch them both at the same time.
You can see the two of them, No, but it's also true that cinema is also a medium shot or a close-up of a person speaking, But again, it's the use of light behind them, the window. That glowing light that you have there.
Well, that's Janusz Kaminski.
Extraordinary, I think. But interesting about the story in that he's dealing with he gets the case with were you at all, or just something that came up when I was watching it the second time, the resonance of today to today, in other words, the difference between a military and a civilian court, and following through on the letter of the law and how it relates to the dealings here with these supposed spies and like Guantanamo at this point?
Well, I think that it's very valid. We were thinking about that all through the movie, and the the amount of just natural moral regard for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
That's it. Yeah.
And giving even aliens equal justice under our laws of democracy, the thing that makes us proud to be Americans, has been lost, and it's been supplanted by the anger, the great rage of many people, and the military's reaction and the government's reaction to our rage to be able to create something like Guantanamo, which is a bit like Lincoln suspending the writ of habeas corpus during the Civil War.
Exactly. Yeah, and all the newspapers, closing down the newspapers, and
that couldn't have happened in such a broad national public way in 1957 to 1960.
No. But it is like reminiscent of a civil war, a global civil war in a way now, these measures. And it's it's very moving to see these characters moving along, working along these lines in terms of like, this is what's right. This has to be done. We can get it in a civilian court. What is it? The appeal? What is it called? The other court?
Well, they went from the appeals court to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Court,
and which Donovan was encouraged not to go to the Supreme Court, and he did. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they almost won. It was a 5-4 decision. That was pretty close, because it was a huge search and seizure.
Well, that's the thing, because they said, no, we brought this from the apartment. So
Right.
did you have didn't you have a
Search warrant?
Warrant. No. We're there. We grab the guy. We take what he has at his place. Exactly. What are you talking about? Well, wait a minute. Well, no, you're not going to call. It's like that great scene with the policeman when he says, "What is it with you?"
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I could understand, because the younger people don't realize the mood of the time.
Right. And I love the cop says to him, "I was third wave on Omaha Beach," and I said, "Tom, tell him you were in the first wave."
Yeah. And the other guys say, "Would you please go, please, officer?" Oh man! But they're shooting in the guy's house.
Yeah, that really happened. But the movie's a true story. I didn't say a true story because we took license with some of the drama. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, they shot Donovan's house, but Donovan had just moved from the house into an apartment. Oh. And I wanted to keep them in the house. It was much more American. It just felt more familiar to keep them in a home, not an apartment. And the second thing was they shot up the house, but only one bullet made it through the window. And of course, I put 5 through the window.
Well, you have to do a few more. Yeah, you have to do a few more, Steve. You got to do. But
you would have done a few more.
No,
right?
I would have done a few more. I would have. Yeah. I would have done a little more. But you know, I mean, he moved. They still shot at him. I don't care where he moved. I'm serious. It doesn't matter. Well, he moved to an apartment. Big deal. They're still shooting the house. What if he'd been in there? What if his kids were, God forbid? You know, I mean, all that.
Well, the daughter, I had lunch with the daughter, Mary Ellen, the youngest daughter. She said the bullet came through the window and just missed her.
Oh, yes, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's great putting 77 Sunset Strip on the TV.
Listen, I watched that show constantly. That and Maverick.
Oh, Maverick. Well, but 77 had Ed Kooky Burns. Lend me your comb, Kooky, lend me your comb. Remember the song? Yeah, it was a big deal. This was the 50s,
I'm looking
guys.
around. I don't think a lot of people remember that right here.
This was the 50s. You know? Talk about the Berlin sequences are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the way it's done.
We shot that in Berlin and Breslau, Poland, just on the German-Polish border.
You know what it reminds you? I love stories of, you know, heroes or people who even aren't heroes, poor guys, men and women just thrown behind enemy lines and they have to cope, you know, and get through somehow. Like, do you remember The Counterfeit Traitor? Yeah, the guy was a wonderful film with William Holden, Lily Palmer, George Seaton picture. And it was the first film to really show, I think, in terms of the theater of Nazism in a way, in Technicolor. And it was made in 57, I think, or 56, maybe, right at the time this story was being made. And it had a Cold War feeling to it, The Counterfeit Traitor. It translated to the Cold War completely.
Yes, exactly. In just after the story happened, Gregory Peck was shooting Arabesque with Stanley Donen and Sophia Loren in London. And Gregory Peck had heard about James Donovan because a lot of people in that era at that time had heard about him. You know, his story has been lost over time, and hopefully we recovered a lot of it. And Gregory Peck decided he wanted to tell the story of the spy swap between Abel. So he went to Alec Guinness and got Alec Guinness to commit to playing Rudolph Abel. Peck was going to play James Donovan, and he set the picture up at MGM. And then MGM read the script, loved the script. I think Sterling Silliphant wrote it, I'm not sure. We never read the script, by the way. We didn't even know about this until recently. I didn't even know the story until the Donovan family told me the story. Because the son, who was 18 at the time, James Donovan's son, went with his dad to meet Gregory Peck while he was shooting Arabesque in London. That's how they first met. And MGM said, nope, we can't make this movie now. There's too much tension between the Soviet Union and America. And they got scared of it politically, and they shelved it.
I mean,
but there's a little tension now between Putin and
there's
this
a little,
country.
yeah. There's some tension now.
Remember Crimea, Ukraine, Syria. There's a little Cold War happening now.
I've only been there once. I was in 1983, visiting Michael Powell and Thelma, a schoonmaker. They were there. He was there working on a film on Anna Pavlova, and Bob De Niro came with me. And but it was remarkable Moscow and at the time Leningrad. But it turns out 1983 was a very touchy year also. And it was a wake-up call there. It was quite extraordinary for many different reasons. But the staging of some of those scenes, like the building of the wall and those kids going over the, it was one of the great shots, really. The kids running through to the wall and climbing over and getting shot down. Yeah. And it's really the shot of Tom looking out the window, and then he's on the right of frame, then he sits down after they're shot, and he goes into darkness.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, yeah. I love him.
Oh, that's what, I said, wow, look at that. That's wow, that's great. But the look on his face and everybody in the train, that's the train. That train, just let me ask you, that's the train. If you were on that train, it was okay to go through the different sections?
Yeah.
I see.
You know, Americans could get they could get a two-way ticket, but the GDR so hassled him and gave him such a hard time because the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, wanted to be recognized as a nation state. Yes. They didn't want to be under the boot heel of Khrushchev and what was going on in the Soviet Union. They kept sort of fighting for their own independence. And when they, captured the other American economic student, he was a political, chip in order to get the Americans, or at least Donovan representing the Americans, to deal very seriously and recognize them as a power to be reckoned with.
Right.
And that'll happen. But it was interesting because it was very strange. We did build the wall. We built it for blocks and blocks and blocks. None of that's digital work. When they're building the wall, that goes for, I don't know, quarter mile or so, all the way down the street. And we were building the wall, and we were shooting those scenes 3 days before the 25th anniversary of the wall coming down.
Oh, God. It's great.
Which was very interesting and very emotional for the German crew and for everybody working on the film, especially some of the older crew members who really had, for them it happened yesterday. Yeah, the wall going up.
Yeah, the soldiers playing. I mean, those guys were they German actors or
they're
Polish?
all German actors.
Because when the ones who stopped him when he's saying "Bitte," I have the.
Yeah, well, Donovan spoke just enough German because Donovan learned his German in the United States Naval Reserve when he was working on the Nuremberg case. So he learned just enough German during Nuremberg that he was able to and he did that. He actually did that. If you read Donovan's memoirs, he started at the back of the line. He looked at his watch. I'm late for I don't even know where the KGB headquarters is, but I got to find it. I need time to find it. And he took a huge cut in line, got in big trouble for it.
That's great. Because also when they finally says, okay, you can go, and they look at him, and then he starts walking.
Yeah.
And there's like no direction anywhere. He doesn't know where exactly he's going. After all that commotion at the checkpoint, quote unquote, he starts walking, and all these kids there, and they got to give him his coat. He has to give his coat, understandable.
It's understandable.
It's cold. Yeah, it's a good coat.
And I didn't put subtitles in because I thought that it'd be scarier for all of us to be Donovan and to try to figure out just by what gesture and expression what was the tenor of that.
Yes, that's great.
That moment where it was dangerous and how dangerous could it have gotten and what did those German kids really want?
Yeah, and when the second time I watched it, I watched each cut and each frame on that the framing of each one and where the kids were in his position and the tone of each line. And I wanted to figure out first time when I realized that they weren't going to hit him, but they wanted something.
Yes.
And we realized it's the coat. Okay.
Yes.
But I had to figure it out like him.
And he was the first thing he said. I think the word is verlaufen, it's lost. And Tom said, "I'm not sure anybody's going to understand what that is. So maybe I can also use some gestures to try to communicate with the German kids." He did this with his hand. Tom, did this, which sort of gives the indication that he was lost. So we helped it a little bit with international hand sign. But it's really interesting because it was so cold shooting this movie. I was so cold shooting this film.
You shot fast, huh?
We shot fast. Oh my God, it was so cold. The only time we had to put breath in, that we got into the safe house. I wanted the safe house to be freezing. It was a real location. It was really cold. But once you get the lights on, you turn on all the lights. You get into the set, and you look at the set, and you're the first on the set with the cameraman. I'm looking around, and I can see my breath, and I say, "Oh, great! Look, I took my phone out and backlit my breath so I made sure I could see it." Yeah. And then Janusz lit the set, and the second the lights came on, the breath went away.
Gone. Yeah, I was wondering.
And I think that the fakest digital stuff. Look, we can create anything digitally, right? Except breath.
Yeah.
We can't do digital breath. Why is that? I don't know why that is. So I had this crazy idea. I said, why don't we do this? Let's get a couple of actors, not the principals, but get a couple of actors, teach them the dialogue, let them hear the lines spoken in their ears, put black masks over their faces so only their lips are exposed, and then backlight the breath, and then let them do all the dialogue. So the breath you see in the safe house is actually breath coming from an understudy's lips.
I wondered how you did that. I said, don't tell me you did the old Billy Friedkin, The Exorcist. You went into a meat locker.
No, we didn't go to a meat locker. No, it was a meat locker when we got there, and then the lights
went on. Yeah,
made it into a nice, comfortable habitat.
No, but and that was an actual location because that room was really something. When he said, "Well, looking at the place, said, where are you going to be?" He said, "I'm going to be at the Hilton." Great, thanks.
I think the way Hank takes that moment.
Oh, it's great.
He says, "I'm going to be at the Hilton," and Tom just looks at him. He doesn't do anything; just looks at him.
Yeah. I mean, you had a lot of the production design. I thought was quite beautiful.
Yeah, Adam Stockhausen.
Yeah,
Adam does all of Wes Anderson's movies.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Because also it had a design to it. I mean, it had a certain look. Linear, kind of. Mondrian kind of feeling to it, I thought. But I did see you had to do it, though. You had to do it. You had to do it.
What was that?
The movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3.
Well, Eins, zwei, drei,
Einstein try.
and Spartacus.
Yes.
He couldn't resist. The man's making a phone call. He's got to get his whole story going on. You got to go to Spartacus. I said, look, I told Francesca, my cousin, look, that's Spartacus.
Well, it's good because Bryan Cranston's playing Dalton Trumbo, so it's for them too.
Perfect. That's right.
You know, I told Kirk Douglas that I said, Kirk, you got to go see the movie because I acknowledge Spartacus in the movie. I won't tell you where. You have to find it.
It's great. And Eins, zwei, drei. But then now, second time, I couldn't read the German on the other titles. What are they?
I forgot.
All right.
But it was Adam came up with it. I came up with Spartacus and 1, 2, 3, and Adam Stockhausen came up with the other two titles.
All right. Good.
But you know there was an intentional. Let me just sort of answer a question you may be asking, but I'll save you the bother of asking the question. This is a spy movie, but it's not a spy movie. It's about spycraft, but it's more about the art of conversation. It's about wordcraft, really.
Yes. Yeah.
And how things can be settled, you know, in a very, very civilized way, if you've got an ethical, principled man who's determined to do something. You're determined even to, when you take ethics and ambition, you combine them. That's who James Donovan was: ethics, ambition, and he wants 2 for 1. Everything's 2 for 1.
Yeah.
So, so in doing all this, one of the things that was important to Joel and Ethan, and certainly Matt Sharman, was we didn't want to show around the next corner. I love movies where you can see around the next corner, and when we get to the corner you would hope for, we all feel good about ourselves because the movie, basically, we got to predict what was going to happen next.
Right.
You don't want to do that in a Hitchcock film,
Right.
but you do want to sort of do that in spy movies. We didn't want to do that in this one. And we also didn't want to have a bunch of trapdoors or red herring, you know, dead ends,
Right.
which is kind of frustrating. It works in The Spy Who Came from the Cold, which is my favorite.
Wonderful. Yes.
My favorite
Marty
spy
Ritt's
movie
film.
of all time.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So I think what we did was I wanted the New York portion of the movie to be very much like, you know, with more colors, just to feel more alive, more like Look magazine, like
That's
Life
what I mean about
magazine.
the design of it. Yeah.
Yeah, like you know, the Rockwellian, not really exaggerating or pushing Rockwell too much, but just more colors. And then the second part of the movie, and I decided to fade out the American part, so it fades out and fades back in on Berlin, and then the entire color palette changes to what you'd expect to be, you know, cold and dreary and blue and overcast and very oppressive. And the reason I wanted to do that was to try to get everybody to understand what it felt like in Donovan's shoes.
Yeah.
To go from that very warm, you know, American safe, protected by all of the laws of the land, into a place that was like a frontier town of Eastern Berlin.
You feel it. You feel it. You feel it. I mean, you get. I mean, sure, from his law office, from his house, everything, and then you know that's why later on when he shows up for the breakfast at the Hilton, it's glorious. The Hilton is glorious. Orange and purple and I don't know. No, orange and blue, right? Orange and turquoise.
It was orange and blue.
It was wonderful, you know. But, you know, during that time also, how should I put it? The paranoia, the understandable under the circumstance. Of course, I was very young, and we were also sort of fed in the movies American paranoid films like Invasion USA and strange films. You told a story the other day about your father going to
Russia.
Could you?
The worst time.
Yeah, I mean, it'll give you an idea of if you want to say it.
Well, what happened was my dad came to dinner one night, me and my 3 sisters in Phoenix, and he said, "I'm off to Moscow," and we were in shock. We couldn't understand what does that mean. He said, "They've asked for volunteers." Senior managers, all of whom were electrical engineers. My dad was one of the first people to work at RCA in 1950 who developed the first actual commercial data processor, the first commercial computer. Everybody following in the footsteps of, you know. So he was asked, do you want to go to Russia on a foreign exchange program? We're going to send 5 engineers from GE, and we're going to get 5 engineers from the Moscow Polytech, and they're all going to come to Phoenix for 3 weeks. And my dad volunteered to do this. And my mom was really upset. I think she left the table. And they had words later because we could hear everything through the walls. And we just didn't want him to go because the paranoia was so thick in those days. Gary Powers had already been shot down. This is before the Cuban Missile Crisis, but still things were very tense. HUVAC, Joe McCarthy, all that stuff was going down. And but my dad was kind of like Donovan, was a stand-up guy, and my dad. I remember my dad saying, if people talk more, they shoot each other less. And we got to go over there, and we've got to show them that we're friends. And also, my dad spoke some Russian because all my great-grandparents and 2 of my 4 grandparents are all from Russia. So when I was born, there were 3 languages: English, Yiddish, and Russian. I grew up with those 3 languages in my house. So my dad went to Russia, and then he comes back with this amazing story. And the story was simply that Gary Powers had been shot down, and there was a huge line to go into a building to look at all the pieces of the U-2 they had collected and put on display. A big piece of, local propaganda. And Gary Powers' helmet was there, and his whole flight suit was there, sort of standing up. So there was, and everything in Russia is a long line, 2-hour line.
Oh, yeah.
Lenin's tomb, 3-hour line.
That's right, yeah, absolutely.
Gary Powers and the U-2, 4-hour line.
Yep.
So my dad's in line for an hour or so, and a military attaché approaches my dad with a bunch of medals and some plainclothes people, and they say the thing you don't want to hear during the Cold War: passports, please. So they had to show them their passports. The guy with the uniform kept the passports and said, "Follow me," and took my dad and his friends all the way to the head of the line, which is kind of cool. They were going to, once again, like Donovan, they were getting cuts.
Yeah.
But when they got to the head of the line, the Russian turned red, bright red. He was furious. And with the passports, he was shaking his hand at the Americans and pointing with his other hand at the U-2 and said, in English, he said, "Look what your country is doing to us. Look what your country is doing to us," over and over again. And I asked my dad, I said, "Were you nervous? Were you frightened? And what were you thinking?" And my dad said, "I was looking at the passports. We were going to get our passports back." That's all he could watch was the passports. Like
That's
this.
right.
He's gesturing with the passports.
That's
my
right.
dad's
Yeah,
watching the passports.
That's it.
Yeah. And then, so I didn't know he had taken, he took a lot of 8mm movies of Russia, and they were really interesting stuff.
Wow.
Some people were very warm, no sound, just 8mm movies, handheld of Russian people, and there were some people that would be shaking their fists at my dad's camera.
Oh, wow.
Just shaking their fists in Red Square. Mm-hmm. So I give my dad the script to read a year and a half ago. I give him everything to read. And he's very honest. If he doesn't like it, he says, "Steve, why are you wasting your time? Why are you doing this picture?" He'll say that to me. But he liked the script. He loved the script, actually. And he said, "That reminds me of the Gary Powers story." He started telling me again. And I let him tell me the story a second time. He said, "As a matter of fact, I've got some pictures here." And he pulled into a drawer and he brought out a huge box of slides. It was all these Kodachrome or Ektachrome slides. Yeah. And he brought out 3 pictures he had taken of the U-2 and the flight suit, which I had never seen until a year and a half ago.
Great. Yeah. Is Donovan, supposedly I heard that his family, they went to Russia a couple of years later. Did he ever meet up? Did he ever meet up?
He went to Russia to have one last meeting because he never saw Rudolph Abel again when Rudolph Abel got into the car. Right. On the bridge. And when he was when he was ill, and he died very young, James Donovan died at about 54. He took his wife and son and they went to Russia. And so this kid's hoping to introduce all of them and have one last meeting with Rudolph Abel. And he was there for 4 or 5 days, and he came back with the news that it wasn't going to happen, and they had to go back to the States.
Wow. So he died at 54? Wow. And Abel?
And Abel lived a while longer. He died about 10 years after. I think he died in 1970, something like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nothing's known about him. The Russians never acknowledged he was a spy. Right. And the only information we got was he was able to be reunited with his daughter and his wife. Wow. Not the wife in the movie.
They're quite
because that's like the fake actor wife.
Yeah, yeah.
That really happened too.
That's amazing. That's a wonderful. And he walks into the embassy with the painting of Lenin on the left, and "I'm here to meet a Mr. Vogel."
Yes, exactly.
He said, "What? I'm here to meet a Mr. Vogel."
No, it was Cousin Drew's, not Vogel.
Oh yeah. And who's the Russian, the head of the KGB? That actor is wonderful.
Oh, His name is Mikhail Solikov. I think it's his name.
yeah.
He's wonderful. He's actually a artistic director and a stage director in Moscow. He
Wow.
has his own
Yeah.
theater today in Moscow.
He's wonderful because when he points out this is a more positive way to go, he says, one for one,
Yes.
it makes better sense.
Exactly.
Don't you think? This is a good thing. No, it's not going to
No, it
go.
wasn't going to work. And Donovan had this terrible cold, and that was something that Tom Hanks found out. Tom Hanks found out that Donovan got really sick on the airplane because he was on one of those
Army,
drafty, flying at 15,000 feet.
Oh, God.
And he got a terrible cold, verging on pneumonia. So, he was sick the whole time he was in East Berlin.
And he did. I mean, that's, it's the idea of taking the coat, just walking for 10 minutes in that kind of weather. I mean, at that point. The U-2 plane itself, you told me, where did you shoot that now? And give a little idea what the planes are like.
Right. We shot that at Beale Air Force Base. The U-2 program is still an active program. And I don't know how many U-2s there are at the base that was classified, but they allowed us to use a vintage U-2, but it had been painted black. And we didn't have the budget to paint it silver the way it was in real life.
Oh.
The U-2s were all silver. It didn't make sense because it made more sense they should paint them black. But they
Yeah, like
painted
the
them
stealth.
silver then.
Yeah.
And we actually flew for us. They landed it and took it off several times, and it was amazing to be in the chase car with 3 cameras in the chase car.
Yeah.
We were moving as fast as the U-2 taking off. So all
Wow.
those shots are no digital work. The only digital work that we do is, of course, when the U-2 shot down.
Yes.
But
Which is,
all the takeoffs and everything around the actual airplane is
Yeah,
real. And it's so funny. I'm here explaining to everybody. I'm saying, please believe it's real.
I know it's.
And
Yeah.
is there
Yeah.
is a day going to come, Marty, and you're more apt to do this than I am, but is a day going to come where you make a movie and it's so visually spectacular that you have to actually advertise that there's no visual shots in the movie, no digital shots in the entire picture.
There might be. There might be.
It's like it's like the anti-color by Technicolor
I
in
know.
CinemaScope
Yeah.
in Super Panavision 70.
Yeah. Yeah.
No digital shots in the film.
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, I've just been back from Taipei.
You were saying that the locations were so spectacular that you were worried that people wouldn't believe that they
they're
were
not going to believe. Yeah.
caught on film.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. And that we got up there in the first place, in some of those places. But
I could interview him.
no,
You have to first understand, we met in 1967.
yeah, that's right.
That's when we first met. Marty had made a film about a guy who gets a very close shave.
The Big Shave.
The Big Shave. And Vernon Zimmerman showed the film on his wall in 16 millimeter and invited me over, and that's when you and I first met.
And you said, what was the film again? The thriller, the one you did, the black and white?
Encounter.
Yeah, that's it. The Encounter, yeah. And that's when we first started hanging out.
We did. I showed you Encounter. You showed me The Big Shave, and that was the beginning of a
it.
beautiful love story.
And we'd always say, but we'd always and then other people would come around, but we'd always sort of gravitate. Hey, did you see this film? What about that? Do you remember that guy? And this sort of, and we'd be really into it all the time. Other people sort of came and go.
Can I tell my taxi driver story?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know which one.
Well, Marty used to become quite apoplectic, especially with studio people. Like all the classic directors that we all have learned so much from. And Marty said, I'm having a big problem. You got to come look at the last scene. I hadn't seen any of the movie. You didn't show me the movie. You had me come to the cutting room. Marcia Lucas was cutting with you. And you said, I just want to show you the shootout at the end.
Yeah, and actually you helped with one of the cuts I was having a problem with. I told Susan Lacey the other day, there was a guy with the glasses that got shot. And I said, I can't make this thing work. He said, do this and that. And it worked. It was on Moviola, actually.
It was on Moviola then. So Marty shows me the sequence, which is with no context, with nothing coming before that scene. I was completely gobsmacked. It was absolutely astonishing. And Marty said, okay, I showed it to you because the studio is telling me I have to cut it. I said, what? They're telling me we're going to get an X rating. I've got to cut the scene. Or I've got to cut all the blood out. I got to cut the fingers coming off when the gun goes off. I got to cut the overhead shot with all the gore and all the long camera that goes all the way to where you took the roof off and shot straight down.
Yeah.
And when Marty could work himself up in those days, not anymore the way he used to.
A little calmer.
But Marty he's a lot calmer. He could so work himself up. And so Marty was actually plotting murder at that point. And could he get away with it? I won't mention the person you wanted to kill. I won't do that.
It turned out it was all right, but
But here's what it turned out. You had a great idea. you explain what you did.
Desaturate the color.
He desaturated the color, and the MPAA gave him an R rating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually that desaturation. I love what Oswald Morris and John Huston did in Moby Dick, 1956. They used a 3-strip Technicolor, and they did something by emphasizing one strip over the other. And I had never seen anything quite like it. I was trying to get to that. I wanted the whole film to be that way. But it,
That was such an important film in my life because I saw that film in a movie theater, and it actually, the first time I ever consciously wanted to physically be part of a movement was when they were killing the whales for the movie.
Yeah.
And I had never seen a whale being killed. And when I went to the movie and I saw those whales being killed, and I knew that the white whale, Moby Dick, was obviously a mechanical whale, but the other whales were real.
Yeah.
I got on a complete tear about that, which has not stopped.
No, I know. I mean, the actual story, the real of Moby Dick. I mean, that it's based on this incident that happened with that whale that got really annoyed. The whale got annoyed. They kept throwing harpoons in the thing. It was really big, and I forget the name of the ship, but it was a book about 10 years ago on this. And they're on the boat and they're looking, and the whale got away, and they're watching the whale go, and then the whale turns. And they're all looking. And this is a moment, right, in the film. And it starts to come at them. And it doesn't stop. And you imagine what one of those guys must have said, I think this thing is going to hit us. It sank the ship. Sank the ship.
Yeah,
so
that's real.
it.
Ron Howard just made the movie. It's called In the Heart of the Sea.
That's it.
With Chris Hemsworth. And it was Hal Melville had heard the story. He went to Nantucket and talked to the widows and talked to a lot of the survivors, and he put the story. That's why he wrote Moby Dick.
Yeah, I mean the idea that the mammal just turning.
But listen. When I made Jaws, that did not escape me. Believe me. The boat, hitting the boat. I'm sorry. I just steal from John Huston. You're stealing from the best, But also, when I was a kid, I remember seeing 20,000 Leagues Below the Sea with James Mason and Kirk Douglas.
Yeah, that's
and remember the Nautilus, very much like that. The Nautilus, is coming straight toward those ships.
Exactly.
With that green glow underwater.
Yeah. That thing still works. You show it to kids, especially on a big screen. They just want to see it over and over again. And it's a remarkable movie.
The other movie my kids want to see over and over again, Swiss Family Robinson.
Oh, they love it. Yeah,
they love that.
I showed them that too. Yeah. What if we were on an island? And what would you do? I said, don't tell me. Don't ask me. I'm not going to be in that situation. Please. It's either that or was it the show Naked and Afraid? You could be in.
Yes,
that's good. Well, they're on an island, right? They're afraid and naked. Oh God. But it's funny because those things are timeless. They're timeless. If shown, even on a small screen, they'll watch it. Yeah. That's the Swiss Family Robinson and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with the giant squid.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
The actor who plays Abel.
Mark Rylance.
Yeah, Mark Rylance. I had no idea who it was all the way to the very end. I thought it was amazing. The anonymity somehow that he used. A totally different style of acting, different thing. But Tom Hanks, whom I adore, it's like, well, how many? It's your fourth picture or fifth?
This is the fourth. Well, the fourth time I've directed Tom in a film, but we've collaborated on miniseries together as producers.
Right.
But Abel was the first time they worked together was that first scene where Tom introduces himself as Donovan to Abel. And after the first take, Tom came out and pulled me aside from to the edge of the set, and he just said, "Oh my God, my job is going to be." First he said, "Oh my God, Mark Rylance," as Tom could do it, and then he said, "My job is going to be not to fall under his spell, because he's so spectacular, being so still. Yeah. I can't take that bait and match stillness with stillness. I have to maintain who Donovan was, the bulldog."
Yeah.
Well,
you could see it in Tom's eyes.
And so Tom continued his dogged pursuit of, the truth and justice and all of that. But there's a great temptation when you're working with an actor of tremendous quiet to return
Yes.
with quiet.
Yeah.
When you're,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was such a tribute to Tom that he consistently kept his character exactly how he originally saw the character.
No, they were
And then you
remarkable.
had two completely opposite performances.
That's why the second time seeing it again, just enjoying the performances. And I think about Tom. I always loved Tom. I always wanted to work with him. And you could see in that first scene, he's looking at him. His eyes are working fast. The other guy's like this, and he's saying. Finally, at one point, he said, they want to electrocute you. He said, aren't you worried? I said, would it help? Okay. All right, I can't go that way. Okay, let me go this way. And you could see it every time.
That was sort of, it wasn't even like playing chess. It was more like a casual game of checkers in the park.
Yeah,
Because you can't play chess with a person like Abel,
No.
The way Mark Rylance played him.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to get a chessboard between the two of you.
Yeah.
But that's what he liked. That's what in real life he liked so much about Abel.
Oh, it's wonderful. Wonderful.
And Mark, as you've seen him on stage, Twelfth Night and
Yes,
Richard
yeah,
III and
yeah.
Jerusalem, and that's why I cast him in this. And I was kind of amazed that he's played a couple small parts in movies, but never something like this before. And I was kind of struck with why not?
Right.
Why now for the first time does he have a major part in a movie? And the other good news about getting people to get to know Mark, Wolf Hall is such a spectacular miniseries. Have you seen Wolf Hall?
No.
That Mark's
No, I
in?
haven't.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Great. And Wolf Hall came, he was
Oh, Wolf Hall, of course. Yes. Yeah.
for PBS, and
Yeah.
and so it's just another aspect of him. He has so many aspects, and so after the first day of shooting, I pulled him aside, Mark aside, and I said, "Hey, Mark, would you read a script?" And he said, "Oh, no, I really couldn't, because if I read a script, it'll take my attention off of this character." I said, "Well, can I give you the script to read when you don't have anything better to do?" So I gave him my next movie, BFG, The Big Friendly Giant, and not expecting him to read it for at least 3 months. And about a week later, he said, "Oh, this is extraordinary,
Oh, that's great.
but there's no part for me." And I said, "Yeah, you're the Big Friendly Giant. Really? Do you see me as the Big Friendly Giant?" Because his character is so different in this movie than it is, and so Mark signed on, and he's
Oh, that's
the
great.
Big Friendly Giant.
That's great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Fantastic. No, it's a real textbook in acting. Between the two of them in those scenes, every scene they're in is just remarkable. But the visuals of the picture hold remarkable. Who did the music again?
Well, the music was Thomas Newman, who has done a number of films for DreamWorks. He did American Beauty and Road to Perdition, a film that we made called How to Make an American Quilt. And he's done a couple of scores for us that have been one, especially American Beauty is a wonderful score.
Yeah.
But John Williams, who was John and I have worked together on every single movie until now. And John was writing Star Wars. The deal we had with JJ was that when I needed John, he'd stop writing Star Wars. He'd do the score, because I only wanted 35 minutes of music. And John knew it was only going to be, 35, 40 minutes of music in the whole film. I always wanted the entire opening to be no music at all, just the sounds of New York.
Right.
Just the sounds of New York. And so...
well, that really works, again, with the visual. You see, the thing I was talking about, the visual, the idea of reflections, painting, self-portraits.
all the natural sounds,
Yeah,
and not try to what we do. Music always elevates something, but I didn't want any of this to be elevated at all.
Yeah.
Except by what we've all seen and experienced ourselves.
Right.
So John called me up, and he was one of the hardest phone calls John ever had to make, and the hardest phone call I've ever had to hear. That all I cared about was his health, but he had to have a what do they call it, pacemaker put in.
Yeah.
And the doctor said, and the procedure went great. It was no complications. He's fine. But his doctor said, you can't write, you can't conduct, you can't do anything for 7 weeks.
Oh.
So John called me and said, what am I going to do? Because I can't work in 7 weeks.
Oh, man.
And then I got to get it back and finish the Star Wars score. So that's the reason. But I hired Thomas Newman because I just have always loved his music and loved him as a person.
Yeah.
But John Williams is part of the Newman family. Alfred Newman, Tom Newman's father,
the
discovered John Williams.
Wow, that's
And
wild.
John's first job was Alfred Newman. Of all the session pianists, Alfred Newman said, "John, I want you to play the piano on South Pacific, Mitzi Gaynor." Right.
Yeah.
And so that was John's first job. He was the session player on keyboard for South Pacific. And then Alfred started using him again and again, and then Alfred started getting him composing jobs. So John's been part of the Newman family.
Oh, it's fantastic.
So it was like I didn't go out of the family when I didn't use John.
No,
I stayed in the family.
That's great. That's great. Alfred Newman, it was at Fox, right? A lot of
Fox. And Lionel was in charge. Lionel Newman was in charge of the Fox music department for many, many decades.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's Alfred Newman's Street Scene, which is in the late 40s and early 50s was the theme for New York. They used it in Where the Sidewalk Ends and everything, and it opens up How to Marry a Millionaire, right? And that's his, Alfred Newman. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
He's a great composer. But so, and we just had a great deal of the shooting here in New York. I just have to throw this in. I've never done a whole movie in New York, but I've also never done half a movie in New York. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had working here. It really was.
Oh, it's
And there's so much going on right now in the city. There's so much going on the streets of the city, at the different studios, and also the different sprouting studios.
Yeah.
I mean, literally. Hey, there's a warehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, right? Busby Berkeley. Hey, let's
barn,
get a show on the road. Let's go into that warehouse and do 18 episodes or something. But it's just incredible shooting here. And I think, and I'm not going to compare, the East Coast to West Coast, except to say in New York, it seems that everybody on the set takes the work personally. I mean, actually feels like they're part of a creative experience. And so there's much more esprit de corps. There's much more, when there's a great take. I've not experienced this too much. It's happened sometimes, but after Mark would do a great scene, or Tom Hanks would do a great scene, or Alan Alda, or Amy Ryan, I'd walk out and I'd have crew members stop and say, that was great.
Yeah.
Oh, they're great together.
Yeah.
I can't believe I couldn't watch it. I couldn't see it because I'm doing my job. I'm pulling the cable, but I could hear it. It sounded amazing. The kind of confidence that gives a director when you've got the crew that organically behind you is you can't pay for that.
No.
Listen, I've gotten some of my best ideas from assistant directors. I have many stories about this, but my favorite story is I was making Raiders of the Lost Ark, and David Tomlin came over to me. And we were shooting the scene in the classroom where Harrison now is in his tweeds and he's teaching class. And all the girls are all moony-eyed over him, and he's talking about all the hidden burrows and how to do archaeology and all that. And David Tomlin came over to me and he said, and he says it the way the English only could, in a dry, throwaway way. He said, you see that girl in the first row, the pretty one? And I said, yeah. And he said, why don't you get a pen and paint love you on each eyelid, and just have her close her eyes, and Indy looks and sees she has love you written on her eyelids when she closes them. And when you hear a good idea, how you go nuts, it becomes the greatest thing you've ever heard. I mean, we probably shot that 14 minutes after David gave me the idea.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's the whole thing here. I mean, did you shoot at Steiner Studio too? At Steiner's?
Bridge of Spies shot at Steiner, which was great.
Yeah.
It's great because the takeout places are really good all
yes,
around
I know.
Steiner.
I know.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Oh, my God. Otto's Tacos. Have you ever been to Otto's Tacos?
Yeah, forget it. It's a killer.
Oh, forget it.
You got to watch out.
My doctor said I should never go to Otto's Tacos again.
No,
my
don't.
cholesterol shot up to...
Well, they're crazy. They're all young. They're all young and big people. I can't get through to them on the set because I'm too short. Seriously. All the guys, they're eating those tacos and things. But we did a lot of the vinyl out there we're doing. That vinyl is that TV thing, yeah. But that's always been the thing with me, doing Goodfellas and so many of the key grips and the sound department and the props. My mother and father used to be on the set. My mother's in the film, so they were all eating together and cooking together. Everybody it was more like a family. There was no doubt about it.
Your mother should have gotten the Oscar.
Oh, thank you.
Especially for Goodfellas.
Oh, God. What a night that was. Oh. It was great. It was one of the easiest things I ever did. I just sat there. On 2 cameras, I mean, kind of easy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because she took over and then that was it. So. Of course, it's me, Marty, and my son's friends. It's not like a big actor or anything. It's Bobby. You know,
Because she looked at Bobby like one of your buddies.
one of my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like the kid who comes over to the house. And Joe too. Same thing. You know.
Yeah, my kids, they were never impressed by movie stars or actors. They only wanted to know the people I never knew, like Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, those were the people I never met. That they didn't think I was worth anything if I didn't know them.
Well, that's the scene in the picture too when he calls with Spartacus in the background. He says, "Can I say hello to the kid?" And all right, can I say hello to this? Is there anyone who isn't too busy? Right, exactly. They should know what I'm doing. They have no idea. Well,
it's just you're creating a story, and you've got to find the humanity somewhere, and it's not just moral humanity. It's the humanity of a man who has a family and loves his family and has a job and loves his job. Yeah. And so we had many more family scenes actually in the longer version of Bridge of Spies. But the movie tells us what to do with it. We all know that. We're all in the same business in this room for sure. And the movie tells us what to do with it. And I don't ever blame myself or feel guilty when I cut out some really good scenes, because the movie says it was great on the day, but it doesn't belong with me.
I know.
It's not really.
I know. It's
telling the story.
It's so upsetting, but it's that fear of seeing the picture for the first time, put together, quote unquote. Yes. Kind of sometimes thrown together, sometimes actually almost halfway there, and then I think it was Departed. I was with Thelma, and I said, "All right, let's put this thing together." I don't know. We worked on it for months, and it's getting harder for me to look at rushes too, because the shoots are pretty long, and so we finally put it together, and I looked at her with her in the screening room upstairs, and after it was over, I think it was like almost 3 hours, I looked at her, I said, "Don't show this to anyone. Lock the doors." And I did. For 6 weeks. They were furious. The backers were going in the studio. We've got to come into the thing. Don't answer the phone. Don't do anything. We rearranged the entire picture. Then we looked at it again, then recut it again, then had 2 people come in to start. But it was so shocking that, and usually it's George Lucas said, if the first cut is good, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
He said a lot of things.
I know. When I made Close Encounters, I used to take my 8mm camera everywhere with me, and my editor filmed me reacting to my first cut of Close Encounters, and the camera pans around, and they couldn't find me. I actually crawled under the chair in the theater. I was hiding under the seat, squeezed in there. It was such a bad first cut. Anyway.
What about, is that the 8mm projector that you had? You projected Spartacus on your T-shirt all the time?
On my stomach.
Yeah.
That was a bad night.
Yeah. Oh,
that
really?
was one bad night. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. But he's got this Spartacus thing. It's just... No, remember you told me you called Stanley Kubrick and you said we're going to restore it. And he goes, "Don't do that. Restore 200001."
Right. You know. Don't restore Spartacus.
Don't restore Spartacus. That's been restored again now. With
I met Kirk Douglas. Was very close to Stanley Kubrick because of Paths of Glory. And then they had a kind of a estrangement on Spartacus. And I remember when I first met Kirk, he was making a picture with, at the time, my girlfriend Amy Irving, with Brian De Palma directing. It was called The Fury. And so we invited Ann and Kirk over to our house to have dinner. And I had gotten this piece of technology, a piece of machinery called a biofeedback machine. And what you do is you strap it onto your wrist, and you put one on your heart. And the idea is there's a red line and a blue line, and you just have to go into a state of meditation, a meditative state. And you just bring the needle down to the blue line and you hold it. Then you ask the person questions, and while you're answering, you have to keep the needle pinned on the blue. And so Kirk wanted to be the first up, so we hook Kirk up, and he immediately gets the needle right down to blue. Like, oh my God, did he spend time in Asia and China? Where did he learn this? And then we started asking him some questions, and I was just saying, and he was keeping the thing pinned, and we were asking him questions, and then I don't know why I said this, but I suddenly just said 2 words, Stanley Kubrick, and the needle went bang, just pinned into the red, and then I understood. Yeah. But I don't know what, aside from saying that it's a wonderful film, and I'm honored to be here again with you doing this stuff. This is the first time we've done this, by the way.
Oh, I think.
This is our first Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
This is our
But we
very
could go
first
on for a
Q&A.
while.
We've tried. I tried to do one for Marty on The Departed, and I was shooting at the time, so it's like
Oh,
this
that's
is.
right.
This
Yeah.
was. I'm so glad you
No,
did this,
no,
Marty.
it's
This is
a
such a pleasure to be here with you.
Terrific film, and all the other stuff we can go through, but I know it's a late night.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.